Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Namo Aniruddhaya Hrishikeshendriyatmane Namah Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nibritatmane Swarga Pavarga Dwaraya Nityam Suchi Sade Namah Namah Hiranyaviryaya Chaturhotraya Tantave Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for joining us on August 10th. We are now going to be talking about verse 4 of Sri Siksastakam. The Siksastakam are 8 verses which were personally composed and spoken by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. And these are found in the Antya Leela, or the very end of Gaur Leela, which was manifest on the planet 500 years back. Now, in the previous session, actually the previous 2 sessions, we spoke of a very, very key verse, and that verse was Trinadapi Sunichena Taroriva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtanya Sadahari. This is verse 3, and this verse 3 is practically giving us, or rather it gave us the process of being able to execute the Yuga Dharma. So every spiritual practice has a well-defined process, and our system has a process as well. And every spiritual system has a process primarily to remove obstacles. And our system has a process to remove obstacles, and that was what was the previous week's discussion. We spoke of Trinadapi Sunichena Taroriva Sahishnuna Amani Manadena Kirtanya Sadahari. And the conclusion, or the definitions which were given in the previous session, were that our process involved becoming as humble as a blade of grass. Our process involved becoming as tolerant as a tree. Our process involved being able to be completely free of false pride, and also having the ability to offer respect to all others. Now, this is a state of consciousness where it is quite natural that all of these need to happen. And this is also giving us a benchmark for us to be able to judge our consciousness. And the definition of humility we shared was that we have to have or develop the ability to accept the environment and accept events in life as arranged by Krishna, and also to have courage to act upon them as Krishna wants us to do so. So this was the environment in the Kurukshetra, the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where Arjuna was presented with a very complex environment. He was presented with an environment where he had to take decisions which were very stressful and traumatic. And in that process, he had to accept the arrangement as given by Krishna. And he also had to develop the courage to act upon those orders, having complete confidence that those orders are ultimately the most beneficial for himself and for the rest of humanity. In a similar fashion, we are also being called upon by Lord Chaitanya in verse 3 for us to act upon our environment with humility. Accept it. Accept your environment. Accept people in the environment as gifts from Krishna. Accept everything in the environment as being given by Krishna, and then use our intelligence and use the facilities and the faculties provided by Krishna to act upon such an environment with effectively, surrendering, of course, to the results given by Krishna. And as a consequence, we would be able to ultimately execute the mission and remove the obstacles that prevent us from being able to access the complete truth of the process of chanting the holy names. In other words, that which prevents us from chanting the pure names. So by following the precepts of verse 3, we would reach a point of becoming completely free of offenses, because we would have the ability to accept the environment. We would have the ability to act upon it quite effectively. As a consequence, we would be completely free of offenses. We would be chanting offenselessly, and that would eventually put us on a platform of being able to take up the pure chanting of the holy names. Okay? So that is what was discussed in the previous session. And in this session, which is verse 4, we're going to go further. We're going to talk about a state, and this state of mind is also being described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. First, I will read from the Siksastakam, And then we will also talk about it from the Srimad Bhagavatam to better understand what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was expressing. The consciousness that is being expressed in this verse is as follows. It is actually saying, Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam va jagadisha kamaye, mama janmani janmanishware, bhavatad bhakti ahetuki tvayi. So, na dhanam, O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth. Na janam, nor do I desire followers. Right? Na sundarim, sorry. Nor do I desire beautiful women, or in the case of women, good-looking men. Na janam, na sundarim, kavitam va jagadisha kamaye. Nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your costless devotional service birth after birth. So, Lord Chaitanya has practically given us several conditions of consciousness that emerge if one were to begin offenseless chanting and have the ability to chant at all times. This is not an imposition on the mind. Okay? It is actually quite frightening for someone who is materially situated, or even for those of us who are in early stages of devotional service. Imagine this particular statement. Okay? And we say that this is the state of mind and consciousness, or rather, it is actually a progressive state that is achieved by sincerely following the process of chanting the holy names. Okay, I do not want anything to do with wealth, or rather, I do not desire wealth. And when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is talking about desiring wealth, he is also talking about desiring subtle wealth. He is talking about subtle, and he is talking about the gross, both. Because initially, you have to accumulate subtle wealth by following the flowery language of the Vedas. By performing karma kanda, by strictly following the tenets of the Vedas, one has to be able to accumulate subtle wealth. What is subtle, or what is accumulated by following dharma, turns into artha. You see, one has to first accumulate wealth in the subtle level. Only then can you manifest it in the bank account. And that is what Mahaprabhu is talking about. He's talking about, I do not want wealth in the physical manifested state. Neither do I want to follow the flowery language of the Vedas, which is kavitam vakamaye. He's not talking about just wealth. He's talking about even accumulating subtle wealth by following precepts of dharma, which is exactly what Krishna spoke about. He says, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. He said, give up mundane desires, the need for us to follow, unwanted desires and so on and so forth in the material world, and surrender unto me. Now, this is a very frightening proposition. Think about it. What do people exist for? Their whole sense of happiness in this world is dependent on being able to accumulate wealth. So the whole process of education, be it primary, secondary, graduate, postgraduate, it all completely depends on being able to accumulate wealth. It is training us to develop wealth, because wealth is a source of sense gratification, not just basic comfort. The more successful one is, or rather, one more successful one educates himself in, the better it is his prospect of being able to accumulate greater level of wealth. Okay, and Mahaprabhu is starting this prayer saying, I have no desires for such. It's actually quite frightening for many who listen to this. Number two, he's saying, na janam, which means I don't want a following. There are very few people who would probably agree with this proposition that they don't want a following. Everybody wants followers. Everybody wants others to look like them. They even want to beget children because children can look like them. Okay, it's like an aspiration. It is almost an extension of oneself. Okay, it is an extension of oneself, so that that is also a part of a human desire to beget children, to beget followers, so on and so forth, who also have the ideals which the person carries and whom they can aspire for and they can look forward to, and so on and so forth. So not wanting wealth, not wanting followers, and then not wanting sense gratification with the opposite gender. If it was men, Sri Mahaprabhu is saying na sundarim, which refers to women. If it was women, we would say we should not be aspiring to have anything to do with the opposite gender, not having any desire to engage in sense gratification with the opposite gender. And then we're talking about a whole plethora of other desires which are met in wanting to control others. Some people have more than just wanting to accumulate wealth, accumulate followers, accumulate desires for sense gratification. They want even more. They want to be controllers. Okay, there are many who want to become big administrators. And then there are many others who want to have immense control over a vast number of people. All of these are solid, active desires. And Mahaprabhu is practically rejecting every one of those aspirations for which we exist from a material perspective. Our whole education system is preparing us for high levels of sense gratification in all these areas, and all of that is being thrown out of the window by Sriman Mahaprabhu. This is very frightening. In fact, this is very frightening to many materialists. If you actually talk to people and give them a perspective of Krishna consciousness and tell them that ultimately we will reach a point where we will have no desires, desirelessness. Okay, in reality, being completely free of desires is very difficult. It's impossible, because you're going to be stimulated by the environment. There will be desires, but then we are being taught how to channel those desires in the service of the Lord. So if we were to talk to a materialist or anyone, or even if we were to consider this without fully experiencing Krishna consciousness, about, not wanting to desire wealth, not wanting to desire the opposite gender, not wanting to desire followers, not wanting to desire, other forms of comfort, and so on and so forth, that's a very frightening prospect. And why is it so? Because if one has not fully experienced spiritual happiness, and if they are asked to give up the so-called material pleasures, it's a difficult proposition. It is a very difficult proposition. That is the reason why there is no such thing as jumping from one to the other. It has to be a gradual process of being able to refine ourselves by coming in touch with the pure name, and then slowly, steadily being able to replace our engagement of the senses with material objects and instead engage them in the service of Krishna. So that is a gradual process. And in the gradual process, for instance, many of you have noticed, many of us have noticed, when we come into Krishna consciousness, our taste, if for example, if someone had a propensity to eat meat and engage in eating meat, this particular taste of eating meat and engaging in actually participating in gratifying our senses by with dead meat and so on and so forth, this was there before people came into Krishna consciousness. But then as time passed on and they came into Krishna consciousness, there was purification. Param Drishtva Nivartate. They developed a higher taste. Slowly, steadily, they developed a higher taste. And the lower taste of wanting to taste dead matter was replaced by the sublime taste of Bhagavad Prasadam. And as a consequence, they were very easily able to reject the old one. Now, what happens when devotees who previously came from a background of having meat see meat? They feel quite repulsive. They find it quite repulsive. They find this whole engagement, the smell and everything, turn their stomach. Summer is barbecue season, and if someone is a meat eater and then has turned into a devotee because they have transformed their ability to taste by coming in touch with Krishna Prasadam, as a consequence, what they would do is they would find it quite repulsive. So our process is not so much a process of a switch, where you turn off one switch and turn on another. Our process is of gradually being able to purify our senses by coming in touch with Krishna. So purify your senses by coming in touch with Krishna, and this becomes very easy to replace low-grade happiness. Happiness which is very low-grade is being replaced by sublime happiness. Then it is very possible. But if this particular statement is read by someone who has not tasted the sublime happiness of Krishna consciousness, then they become very scared and frightened to even come near Krishna consciousness, because they think that what kind of a process is this? They're going to take away my ability to accumulate wealth, okay? Because you become desireless. As a consequence, you're not going to be very successful in the real sense of the world. There's not going to be any followers, which means I'm not going to do anything wonderful. And actually, I'm going to lose interest in the opposite gender, which is considered to be quite dysfunctional in this world. And then I'm also, going to give up the pursuit of happiness and position and so on and so forth, of control. And this is very frightening to people who have really not tasted and have not made an attempt. But this is something which is conceptually a wonderful target for those who have entered into Krishna consciousness and who have received, the gifts. Krishna is also a very big strategist. You see, if we talk about strategy, it is because Krishna uses strategy. Otherwise, how would we know anything? Now, Krishna's strategy was to give us mild taste. So the first time when we come into Krishna consciousness, he allows us to experience Krishna consciousness in different ways. Some of us feel very enthusiastic in the beginning, and then we find that the enthusiasm wanes because we haven't really stepped up to the plate. You see, Krishna consciousness is like climbing a cliff, and you go from one level of the cliff to the other. You pause and learn what that particular level is. But there is an expectation that you ratchet up your performance each time you go up. You cannot stay stationary. It is not a lateral movement. It's not something where you can just move on a firm plane. If you try moving in Krishna consciousness on the same level, which essentially means you're going to be putting in the same level of effort year after year, month after month, then very soon we would find that we are starting to dip down. This is not a process where you can maintain level. You cannot. You are either climbing up or we're going down. You can maintain level for a brief period of time when we accumulate knowledge for us to be able to move forward. We have to be very careful with Krishna consciousness because of the potency. The potency is such that at every level, you're being given gifts. And these gifts are motivations for the subsequent level. So there is great motivation for one in terms of receiving knowledge. So we spoke about Madhurya Kadambini, we spoke about Harinam Chintamani, we spoke about so many other things, and we gave gradations of levels and experiences. The Shastra speaks quite extensively about experiences. So why is it being shared? It is being shared because one starts aspiring for the next level. So one has to know that, okay, I've come to this level. Kids who play games, I think they probably would understand this very well because they know that there are different levels of complexity and there are also rewards. They probably are coming into a big group of people who have achieved a certain level. As they go higher and higher, they probably have a feeling of being elite. It is the same situation because fewer and fewer people are going to be able to move higher and higher because there would be a natural elimination process based on our attraction and our sincerity and so on and so forth. So Krishna consciousness is a cliff. Please remember that. It is not a plane where you keep walking. No, it's not. It is a cliff that requires climbing. What it means is that it's going to get steeper. It is going to get steeper. And it is also a fact you're going to get lonely. Fewer and fewer people are going to be there when you reach the top from a material perspective. Okay? So there will be fewer and fewer people. From a spiritual perspective, the experiences will be very enriching and there will be a lot to aspire for as each person moves forward. So one has to remember that. So from that perspective, this particular verse of na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, it's frightening if we do not know that there are wonderful things beyond. But if we knew that there are wonderful things beyond, then this low-grade happiness of this world, it is actually a mess if you really understand it. And if you experience higher taste, then we would be finding it quite easy to move further. Okay? The Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 11th canto, there's a beautiful verse which addresses this particular condition. And it is actually a simultaneous condition. What Mahaprabhu is talking here is quite simultaneous. We will just read that verse. The translation of 11.242, devotion, bhakti, direct experience of the Supreme Lord, which is directly being able to come in touch with Krishna because our sambandha with Krishna has increased and we have understood who we are, we have understood who is Krishna, and we are able to relate to him at a particular level. We are able to engage in service. We are talking about sambandha increases. As a consequence, abhideya, which is the practice of Krishna consciousness at a certain level, is also quite high because there's greater level of sambandha. You interact with even greater level of affection. You interact with even greater level of intimacy. Okay? As sambandha increases, bhakti increases. So here it is said, devotion, direct experience of the Supreme Lord, and detachment from other things. Three conditions: devotion, direct experience of the Supreme Lord, detachment from other things. These three occur simultaneously for one who has taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These three conditions are occurring simultaneously. So one does not have to worry that they have to give up the so-called happiness of this world. They're only giving up when they receive something higher. But unless we have an active desire of wanting to achieve the higher level of Krishna consciousness by performing austerity, we would not be able to give this up. Please understand that. Krishna is not going to come to us and reveal the spiritual sky unless we are ready to actively say that Krishna, I want nothing but you, which is what this verse is. Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim. Give up everything. I'm ready, Krishna. I just want to engage in your service. I want to come back to the spiritual sky. The beauty about Krishna consciousness when we come in and when we gain knowledge, we spoke for the last several weeks on different topics. And what did we present? We presented a scenario where we said that Krishna consciousness is like a curtain. A curtain is separating us. There's a lot of activity which is going on beyond the curtain. And that curtain will not be moved, revealing all the activity that is going on behind the curtain until and unless we develop a very deep desire of wanting to see what is beyond the curtain. And developing that very, very deep desire requires that the child which is in us give up the so-called low-grade happiness of this world. So the objective of Krishna consciousness has to be very clear. The objective of Krishna consciousness, or rather objective of life, is to be able to keep Krishna in the center and then put everything else in the periphery. If we do not do that, and if Krishna is not in the center, and instead our professional life is in the center, or our family life is in the center, or some other accomplishment is in the center, then Krishna consciousness will take a hit. Krishna consciousness is such that Krishna really wants us to put him in the center. Go back to Damodar Leela. Mother Yashoda was churning, or rather she had put milk to boil. Okay? And then Krishna basically was feeding. She was feeding Krishna. So she put him down so that she could attend to the milk. And because she put him down, he became quite irate and he broke quite a few pots and so on and so forth, as if to teach her a lesson and also to tell us, don't put me down. Nothing is important. Nothing is important. When I'm involved, nothing is important. So he's trying to tell us that I'm here. I want to interact with you. Whatever you have heard is true because it's in the scriptures. It's in the revealed scriptures. And whatever is happening behind the curtain is something that you can also participate in, but you really have to desire to come behind the curtain. You really have to have the desire for you to qualify, for you to be able to see beyond the curtain. The curtain is going to be parted for those who have very sincere desires for them to be able to move forward. Sincere desires to part the curtain would require an active distaste for what is being offered here. It is almost like saying, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in what is being offered here. I want what is being offered by you, Krishna. And this message has to go out. This message will go out while we chant. This message will actively go out when we make an attempt to chant sincerely. That Krishna, I want to come back. Krishna, I want to come back and participate in the Leela, which is going on. And I'm a part of it. So the more information we get about what's going on behind, the more information we get about what our role is behind that curtain, the more eager we become. Okay, so here it is said, devotion, direct experience of the Supreme Lord, detachment from other things. These three occur simultaneously. So there's nothing to worry about. It's going to occur simultaneously. So do not become discouraged by the statement or frightened by saying, oh my God, na dhanam, na janam, na sundaram. I'm going to run away, throwing my beads away. Because, what am I going to do? If Krishna consciousness is going to take all of this away, what is left for me? Okay? Further down, for one who has taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in the same way as pleasure, nourishment, and relief from hunger come simultaneously and increasingly with each bite for a person engaged in eating. So if you get real food, pleasure, nourishment, and relief from hunger, all of this is simultaneous. Similarly, devotion, direct experience of the Supreme Lord, and detachment, they come together. This is a stage. It's a progressive level of achievement in Krishna consciousness. So Mahaprabhu is basically setting the stage. This verse also equates to Anya Bilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadi Anavratam, Anukuliyana Krishna Anushilanam, Bhakti Uttama. This verse equates to Uttama Bhakti, the aspiration for Uttama Bhakti, where one does not aspire for the minimized and very tasteless aspects of existence which the material world offers. One is aspire for what's behind the curtain. They're actively desiring. It's an active desiring process, Krishna consciousness, by the way. Our desires have to be managed. They have to be very actively desired. We cannot be having something in the side. If people desire wealth, for instance, let's look at some of these categories, right? These are all separate from Krishna because we are used to doing this. We have been trained to do this. We are called unsuccessful. We are called names. In that sense, the Western world is not so bad because children don't grow up with too many aspirations of just doing this or that. They do have a lot of latitude in being able to act. But in India, if you grew up in India, we all know how we all grew up. There's constant pressure, and the pressure is probably even higher now for performance. Making sure that the kid goes, they carry a whole ton of books. There's so much pressure on them to being able to perform higher and higher. And why is it so? Because we have been trained, and we get trained so well that it is difficult for us to give up our sense of success. It's very difficult for us to give up our sense of success. Now, we come into Krishna consciousness, we have to learn or unlearn our ambitions. Now, Krishna consciousness is going to give us the ambitions, and then we're going to fix our life around Krishna consciousness. It's not the other way around. It's not the other way around. There should be no adjustment where Krishna has to adjust to our aspirations. Oh, Krishna, why don't you just wait? I'm going to come back. Okay? That's not going to work because Krishna doesn't work that way. Krishna says, you keep me in the center and you revolve your life around me. Your agenda has to go around me. If you're taking a decision, you will take a decision based on that. You will develop an identity based on who I am. That is what Krishna is saying. He's saying, Sarva Dharman Parityaja. Dharma has to do with identity. One cannot perform dharma without having an identity. If one wants to perform the dharma of a father, that identity of a father is taken up, and then he performs the duty of a father. So Sarva Dharman Parityaja means that you give up all other identities which are secondary, put them in the periphery. It doesn't mean that they don't exist. It means that they are not central to your existence. It is not central to our existence. Put them in the periphery. Put the identity of being Krishna Das, being a servant of Krishna, right in the center. Okay? Put everything else in the periphery. And then start acting upon it. Now let's take a look at what Mahaprabhu is talking about when he has specifically mentioned this. Okay? One of the desires that distracts us is liberation. Liberation is a desire which distracts us. What is liberation? Liberation is practically a situation where we are saying that I have come to knowledge, there is jnana, I have understood what is wrong and what is right, and I do not want to be a part of this material sky because this material sky is full of suffering. Every step can lead me into grave danger. I have experienced a lot of suffering. I have no desire to experience suffering. This is the question for liberation. I want moksha. Moksha is a desire to end suffering. It is better than sense gratification in the sense that the aspiration is to leave the material world. However, it is a desire which is selfish. Moksha is a selfish desire. Okay? Lust, kama. I don't need to elaborate on kama because people think, what is wrong with that anyways? What is wrong with our lusting on someone? What is wrong with someone lusting on us or people lusting after each other? What is wrong with that? The real issue is that it is a degrading consciousness which comes along with kama. What happens with kama is that we have to come back. That's the real issue. We constantly would be distracted. We would have to come back. If there are desires, active desires, the most powerful active desire is the desire to engage in sense gratification with the opposite gender. The most powerful. Most powerful. It is one of the highest distraction possibly for most people. Even if it is subtle, it is very, very distracting. And in such a desire, what is dangerous about it? Mahaprabhu is quoting that. He's saying, na dhanam, na janam, na sundaram. What is so dangerous about this whole desire of sense gratification is that it will leave very deep impressions in the chitta. If someone comes in contact with the opposite gender, the impression on the chitta, the consciousness is very deep. It is very deep. And it is very difficult to shake off the attachment. If there is any suffering in the world, the greatest level of suffering which people experience is in relationships. It is. They experience the intense suffering due to relationships. And as a consequence, it is required that people understand that the more and more they come in touch with the opposite gender, if there are multiple relations, greater is the suffering. Greater is the suffering. It's very difficult to remove these impressions from the chitta, the consciousness. It will come back. 20 years back, 30 years back, all those memories are still fresh in the consciousness because of the nature of this particular activity. It's very, 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 what do you call it? The sense of touch is the most contaminating amongst all senses. It's very difficult to shake off. And that's the reason why karma is a tough one to handle. Okay? That's the reason why it is required that one actively desire. Even if one is single and they have to find someone, it has to be an active desire of wanting to find someone who would assist them and also be a partner in Krishna consciousness. If they're going to have desires which are exclusively based on wanting to engage in sense gratification, they will find people who could be very disappointing. So one has to manage the desire in here as well. It is required. There is an active management of desires which are required. Then economic development. This is again a huge problem. The huge problem which we have is not so much for wanting more and more. It is a cultural issue. It is how we are cultured. Success in this world is measured by a higher level of opulence, which is a fact. How education is measured by who gets the bigger salary. If you go to Harvard, you get paid a bigger salary. You go to Stanford, you get paid a bigger salary. So we do have a measuring rod which is related to this. Okay? And what happens? The real issue is that there's a tremendous amount of prana which is being thrown out when we accumulate beyond what we need. And what Mahaprabhu is talking about is that I do not want to have this particular aspect of wealth. And we have to understand it by way of saying that we need only so much as to be able to execute Krishna consciousness comfortably. We need money so that we don't have to think about it. Okay? So consciousness really makes a difference. It really becomes a problem if it's an issue. So Mahaprabhu is bringing it up because it's a distraction as well. How you are going to accumulate it, what you're going to do with it, can bring all kinds of reactions to keep us in this world. Religiosity. The whole idea of dharma, Krishna is talking about sarva dharman parityajya. What is he talking about? He's saying that give up religiosity for the purpose of using God to fulfill desires. So that is what Srila Rupa Goswami talks about when he says Jnana Karmadi Anavratam. Jnana, liberation, Karmadi Anavratam, it covers practically everything. Karma is done for the purpose of sense gratification. Okay? Jnana Karmadi Anavratam. Then the seed of sinful desires, which is also an issue. The seed of sinful desires is such that basically people would find it very easy or motivated in certain ways. The seed exists. And if the seed is acted upon, it becomes problematic. So how do we handle this? The higher taste. Slowly, steadily, we would find as each year goes on in Krishna consciousness that the seed disappears as well. The holy names have the ability to completely destroy the seeds of sinful desires. And the last part which we are talking about is the idea of wanting to be a controller. There are many who aspire actively. Because they are not very successful in the material world, they aspire to be successful in organizations in the spiritual world as well. So there's a lot of desire to be a part of a spiritual organization and to climb up the ladder in the spiritual organization, which is unfortunate. But it exists. So what happens? It's a dangerous position again, because we would again be receiving and coming back to this particular planet for the purpose of wanting to administer, wanting to be a demigod. This is a desire. This is an active desire as well. So these are various desires which capture people and keep them behind the curtain. Mahaprabhu is bringing it forth, saying you'll have to actively manage these desires. If you have such aspirations, find out if Krishna is in the center. Are these aspirations sincerely keeping Krishna in the center? If they're not keeping Krishna in the center, ensure that this is an obstacle which we are going to face at some point. It's actually a disturbance. If you find that you have desires, we will find in our heart that it disturbs us. It disturbs. There's some level of anxiety which is caused by the desires. Many of us experience it. If we have desires, it causes some anxiety about the future. And we will understand that if these desires are indeed conducive for Krishna consciousness, they are worth pursuing. That's what Krishna is telling us. Mahaprabhu is telling us you manage it actively. Otherwise, there's going to be a problem. Na danam, na janam, na sundarim, na vishkavi. Right? Na janam, na danam, na sundarim. So, sorry, na danam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam va jagadisha kame. Mama janmani janma ishware, bhavatad bhakti, ahetu kitvaye. Devotees are not interested even in liberation. They're not interested in going anywhere as long as they have the ability to engage and come closer to Krishna and serve him. And that service can be offered whilst being on this planet. It can be offered. So devotees have no hang-ups in terms of going anywhere, of elevating themselves, and so on and so forth. They're interested in serving. And they want to experience Krishna fully. They want to have the highest experience of Krishna consciousness. And that is the highest selflessness. Why so? Because the state of mind and consciousness in Vrindavan is completely selfless. So it is not a selfish aspiration. It is the original aspiration, because originally we are parts and parcels of Krishna. Okay, so that's the distinction. So again, we want to summarize very quickly. The verse in reality, na danam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam va jagadisha kamaye, mama janmani janmaneshware, bhavatad bhaktir, ahetukitvaye, is a frightening verse if one is not very clear or has not tasted the sublime effects of Krishna consciousness. However, scriptural proof is very clear. It says that direct perception of the Lord or association of the Lord, bhakti, and detachment from all the effects of the material world are going to come together. So one should not become deterred or disappointed by a verse such as this, which is practically telling us that you have to give up all the aspirations that we have coveted and worked for in this life. That is not the purpose of this verse. This verse is telling us that you would actively desire Krishna when the consciousness and the right consciousness is present. And that is exactly the message which is being given by Mahaprabhu. He's saying that this is something where the direct perception of the Lord and association of the Lord will be made available. There would be intense bhakti, there would be sambandha gyan, there would be association, there will be wonderful activity that is very clearly elevating, and as a consequence, we would naturally not want any of this. So that's what we need to understand here. All of this is going to be naturally detested by the spiritual achiever at some point, and that achievement would completely shadow even liberation, where the person would not even want to be liberated because they're already liberated while being here. So that is the purport that we have to understand from this. And we also spoke of the fact that we have to actively manage our desires, keeping Krishna in the center. Please do that. Write it down if there are aspirations, and introspect to see if those aspirations have Krishna in the center. If those aspirations, you cannot fit Krishna in the center, understand that we are simply aspiring based on a peer pressure. We are aspiring based on the past conditioning. Okay, please understand that. If you cannot keep Krishna in the center, and if it is a challenge keeping Krishna in the center with our aspirations, we should watch out for that. The real issue is people have not fully accepted the goal of Krishna consciousness. There have been very few experiences. As a consequence, they are not fully convinced. And since they are not fully convinced, they are not ready to give up aspiring for other levels of happiness available in this world. That is a real issue. And how can you really go forward in Krishna consciousness to experience higher taste? You really go forward in Krishna consciousness to aspire higher taste by doing better each day. If we put in a certain level of effort in the previous year, this year has to be better. Next year has to be even more. And the following year has to be even more. Why do we expect that Krishna consciousness is going to promote us if our effort is going to remain the same, while our corporate agenda is that every year we have to put in more for higher levels? Why do we expect that spiritual life has to behave differently in terms of efforts? Why do we expect that if we neglect Krishna, he is still going to come and he's going to make all the arrangements for us and we're going to experience a high level? Why do we expect that? If we neglect something in our life, it's going to go away. Krishna consciousness will go away if it is neglected, if it is not taken care of properly. This is the greatest gift one can possibly have. Greatest gift. If there is anything worthy of being born in this particular universe, in the material universe, or on the planet, it is to pursue Krishna consciousness as given by Mahaprabhu. If there's any goal which is worthy, it is this. Is there any price which can be paid? The answer is yes. Okay? The answer is yes. Any price can be paid for this. And that's what we need to understand. And we are not going to be expected to pay a big price today, but the attitude should be that every year we work harder. We do work harder. We put in more, not less. We should not expect that I'm doing the same thing as I did 2 years back and I'm going to expect something wonderful to happen this year. What did I say? You don't go this way in Krishna consciousness. You don't walk on a plane. You learn to climb, and each level, you have to ratchet up the effort. You really have to work harder as you go higher because the climb is going to get steeper. It is not going to become difficult because we would be good climbers as each level goes up. It will become easier, but effort also has to be more. Correspondingly, the expectation is more. It's like getting promoted. Higher and higher, the expectation is more for performance. Why would it be any different in Krishna consciousness? Okay, I'm going to end here. All right, let's see if we have a question. I have a question. Not sure you already mentioned this, as we lost connection in between. Is it correct to say that chanting helps to get detached, and detachment further helps in pure chanting, like a positive feedback process? Chanting detaches us naturally. The answer is yes. The detachment process that comes from chanting is quite sublime. In what sense? It is not a forced process. It is gradual. And as we chant, we develop a higher taste. It is almost as if a good example would be that we were eating, let's say, very plain food. We were eating very plain food. And all of a sudden, slowly, steadily, we have the ability to eat better. And as we have the ability to eat better, slowly, steadily, we are able to understand and appreciate food. So it's a gradual process where our taste for food develops and arrangement is also improving. Okay? In a similar fashion, Krishna consciousness allows us to move forward by becoming detached to things which are of a lower taste and lower nature, and we become attached to a higher taste. So in the food example, it is easy to give up low quality food and to accept high quality food, okay, because it's being made available. In a similar fashion, it is easy when we chant for us to look at something and some aspect of our life and say that this is of a lower level. Now let me spend time, let me invest time, let me make the changes so that I can experience the higher level. This is param drishtva nivartate. Slowly, steadily, we make progress year by year for us to be able to experience higher. As we experience higher, we give up lower. That detachment is true. Okay, this is not detachment as in suppression. This is detachment after coming in touch with true knowledge. Big difference. Detachment and suppression is where we still carry all the propensities, but we force ourselves to not do certain things. Here there is some force, but it is very initial. It is in the beginning. Everything else, after some time, it gradually it comes naturally. You don't have to force yourself. So it is like detachment further helps in pure chanting. It is a positive feedback process. It is a positive feedback process. But however, one thing which I do want to mention is that we become detached from matter and we become attached to spirit. So there is attachment. There is detachment, there's attachment as well. One cannot just remain detached and be in a limbo in between. That position is frustration. So one has to detach and then one has to attach. One becomes more and more attached, detachment occurs naturally. One has to understand that. It's not artificial. We cannot suppress ourselves and hope that things will work out. Suppression will bring frustration. Gradual progress with knowledge, one is able to develop sublime taste. Okay? It's very easy, actually. If someone is accultured to honoring just prasadam, try this out. whoever it is in the audience, try it out. If you haven't already done so, try it out. If you just get used to eating prasadam and do nothing else, after which just try taking a break and eating prasadam, eating food which is not prasadam. You will find that the food, even cooked by the greatest of chefs, is actually quite tasteless, or rather it does not taste as good as we would want it to be. Why is it so? It is so because we have developed a higher taste. So there's a natural purification of the senses, and as a consequence, we develop a higher taste and we give up lower. It is not a question of giving up everything. It is a question of replacing the lower with the higher. So there's detachment, and then there's attachment to the higher aspect. There are many devotees who join the movement because of prasadam. Those days, the prasadam aspect in devotional service, the prasadam in our temples during the Sunday feast, was very elaborate. Srila Prabhupada's time, he wanted to convert the meat eaters into being able to accept prasadam, and as a consequence, everything was cooked with great care. In the Western world, people used to take great care in making sure that the puris were puffed up. They used to have cottons which were corrugated so that they could keep the puffed up puris without crushing them. So each puri used to go into a separate section of the container, and this is how they used to serve. There used to be halwa with a lot of butter and ghee and all that stuff. So it was very rich fare which was offered during the Sunday feast. There were many who joined after simply coming in touch with that prasadam. There were many who ate something like a simple samosa which was offered to the deities and got hooked to the movement. So what is this? This is practically a situation where there is a higher taste which they've come in touch with, and they are attracted to it now, and they want to have more of the higher taste. And when they have more and more and more, they give up the lower. So they detach naturally because they get attached to the higher. It is not suppression. That's the only point I wanted to convey. Any other question? We probably have around 30 seconds or so. I will wait for questions. Okay, it appears that I don't see any questions. If there are any, please post it when we post it to the website, or you could post it under beneath this in Google event, and we would have the ability to answer. So thank you very much for joining us. In the subsequent session on Thursday, we'll take up verse 5. Today we have concluded verse 4. Hare Krishna.